Hey everybody,
Hey y'all.
welcome back to another fantastic edition of the show. Thank you for tuning in once again.
Thank you so much.
We do not take it for granted that you are here, and we are glad that you are.
Absolutely.
We tackle the topics, man, that need to be tackled.
Yes.
We are on a journey to take dominion over your money and your life. So we'd like to bring you every angle of those two pathways, because we want you to have dominion in this life, not just the next one.
That's right.
And today we're going to be talking about finances inside of a blended family.
Yeah, I think that's so needed. The blended families are becoming more and more, common.
Yeah.
And so I love being able to have conversations like this to be able to meet the needs of just different family types. And so I think that you guys are going to learn something amazing on today that's going to be helpful for your blended family.
We're going to be talking with Ron Deal. He's a part of Family Life Family. And that's a cool phrase, the Family Life Family. And he's got insight on this because he helped write a whole book on it. And so we've got him here to kind of break this down, because if this is you're in a blended family situation, we want you to excel. And so this is something that you're going to need to take notes on. So as we always say, get your pen, your paper, your note-taking device, and get ready. Let's get Ron on so we can hear his great wisdom on the matter. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Guys, thanks for having me. This is exciting. You know, when we met not too long ago, I was so impressed with the work that you're doing. So it's a real honor to be with you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. We were as impressed after meeting and talk with you. It's like, man, he looks familiar. And then after you say, oh, yeah.
Nice.
But for some people, they're being introduced to you for the very first time, right here and right now. So can you say hello to them and let them know what you are all about?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So hello, listener. Thanks for being with us. So I lead a large blended family ministry and, work for a large marriage and family organization called Family Life for about 30 years now. I've been specializing in working with step family ministry and therapy. And I brought that expertise into the ministry of Family Life, and now we take it all over the world in the form of what we call Family Life Blended. And we do, you name it, we do it. We have a Family Life Blended podcast that is a deep dive into blended family living. We do live events. We do virtual events. We're involved in everything that Family Life does on the web, articles, largest collection of articles and videos and resources for families and for church leaders, for people who are trying to minister to others in their community. We equip church leaders to understand step family living and then what they can do about it in terms of marriage ministry, local ministry to children and teenagers and things like that. We do a couple of live events I'll tell your listeners about real quickly. Every spring, we do an event called Blended and Blessed. It's a live stream event your church can host for less than $100. Couples can attend this from anywhere in the world. It's also live streamed in Spanish. So you don't have an excuse. One day event. Next one will be Saturday, April 2nd, live from Houston, Texas. If you live in the area, come join us. If not, sit at home and watch it on your phone or your laptop or whatever's convenient for you, and get some real education about step family living. The other thing we do is in the fall, and we call it the Summit on Step Family Ministry, and that's about learning to minister to couples and families in step family situations. And that's a 2-day in-person event. And we move that around the country this next year in 2022. It will be in Phoenix, Arizona. So all of those are recorded. If you miss them, you can get the videos online for back events from years gone by. So we just try to make as much available to people as we possibly can.
The term blended family can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So what are all the different forms and participants when you say blended family? Whose ears should perk up? Who should say, oh, that's me?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking, because language is a problem when it comes to this subject matter. So when I say blended family, it's also interchangeable with the word step family. Some people just prefer one or the other. We're talking about family situations where one of the two adults has brought at least one child from a previous relationship, whatever that is, from a marriage that later was the divorce, or maybe one of the parents died, or maybe somebody just had a child and with a partner and they've now split up. And so, I'm bringing that child, if you will, into this new couple relationship. That's a step family. That's what we're talking about.
So you've been doing this work for, you said, over 30 years, specifically dealing with blended families. What are some of the common areas of concern when it comes to tackling finances?
Yeah, well, okay. So here's what it is. Let me tell you the background to this book that we wrote, The Smart Step Family Guide to Step Family Finances. This is one book out of 9 that I've written about blended family living. But we felt like, and I'd kind of dabbled in the money stuff in some of the other books, but we never wrote an entire book. So I teamed up with 2 people because I don't know everything. I'm the family therapy. I'm the relationship guy. So I teamed up with a financial planner and an estate attorney, and we put our heads together. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. What do you get when a financial planner and a therapist and an estate attorney walk into a bar? Well, we walked into a book, and we just tried to create something that would help people deal with not just the money questions, but the relationship issues behind the money questions. So let me give you an example in a blended family. Man meets woman. They've both had a little bit of a life. Maybe they were both married and divorced, 1 or 2 kids. Maybe they each have 2 kids. So they got 5 kids between the 2 of them. He's got a little bit of a 401k that's going with his work. She's got some money set aside. He's got an income. She's got an income. They have child support things. They have money moving back and forth between homes to pay medical bills with their former exes, all kinds of little moving parts to this equation. And the first question they have is, do we do a prenup? Oh, are you going to put my name on the beneficiary list of your life insurance? Oh, you have a house. We're going to move into your house. So what happens if you die? Do I have the house? Or I think the house is going to go to, well, you haven't changed. It's going to go to your former spouse or your kids. Well, wait a minute. Where does that leave me? Homeless? Like, these are the real questions. Oh, you've got 3 bank accounts. I got 5 bank accounts. I got one, I'm saving money for my kids' college. I got one where I'm putting money away for savings. I got another one that's my checking account. I got another one that's just sort of the Christmas fund money. So we have 8 banking accounts. Do we keep 8 after we get married? Do we consolidate? Do I put my money in your accounts? Some of that money goes to pay child support. I'm not sure I trust how your former spouse deals with money. Are you with me? Like, real fast, you have a lot of real life questions. How about older couples? Maybe you were widowed and you're getting Social Security. And now you're dating again, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute. If we get married, do I lose my Social Security? The answer to that, by the way, is if you get remarried before age 60, yes, you do. You lose your spousal benefits from Social Security. But if you get married at age 61, if you wait 3 days to your birthday and you get married at age 61, you keep all of the Social Security that was coming to you from your former spouse after they passed away, and your kids maintain that benefit as well. And now you can move into the new marriage receiving that benefit. Like, all of these little rules and laws and things that have big implication for how you join your union together. I mentioned the prenup. I don't know how you guys feel about that. The first thing most people say when you mention a prenup is, oh, great, we got to have that conversation. And I agree, guys, like, that's a scary conversation. The reason people react to that is because it's sort of like, okay, as my good friend Greg Pettis, who was one of the co-authors on this book, he said, a prenup is basically what I'm not going to give you when we no longer love each other. That's bad news from the get-go, right? Who wants to have that conversation?
Up front, yeah.
On the front end, or even maybe you're married and now you want to figure out the post-nup. How do you... That's an ugly conversation. So here's what we did essentially in this book. I'll just give you one punchline, all right? As Greg says it, we took the best of a prenup. That is the idea of planning and preparing. And we turned the prenup upside down and shook out all the animosity, all the bitterness, and all the anger that comes along with that. And we reformatted that into what we call a togetherness agreement. And we encourage people in this book to not plan to fail, or how you're going to respond when you fail in your marriage or family, but plan to how you're going to love and honor one another and each other's kids during life, and should the worst come, during death. How are we going to be together? Let's plan for how we use money to serve each other and our priorities and our values, so that we have more trust in each other as a result of our planning, and not have more fear about what's not going to happen if something falls apart. So a togetherness agreement changes that dynamic right away, and it puts couples on okay, we're planning for how we're going to do life together.
I love that.
Yeah. So, is there any traditional money advice that you would prefer that blended families take a deeper look into, such as like that snowball, who's been on life insurance policies, like things in a traditional setting? Is it different when it comes to a blended family approach?
Yeah. So let me just kind of talk around a little bit of things. Again, we always want to help people think above the surface money issues. Like, that's the stuff you guys are really experts at. I'm not so much of an expert on that at all. But also we want to talk to them about the below the surface relationship dynamics that are influencing how you make above the surface money decisions. Debt snowball, for example, great strategy. Not too long ago, my oldest son, who's now married, been married less than a year, called me and said, "Dad, we paid off a debt doing the snowball." And I'm like, "Way to go, son. I'm so proud of you." He listened. You know what I'm talking about? When your kids actually listen and apply, it's like, hallelujah, that was a good day. Now, if you're in a blended family situation, all right, debt snowball, traditional thing. We're going to pick the biggest debt. We're going to put all our money towards that we can. And when that's paid off, we're going to snowball that money onto the next biggest debt. We're going to knock them out one at a time until we get through everything. Wonderful plan. Well, yeah, I may need to run through an extra filter or two. What if one of you came in with a whole lot of debt and the other one had a little bit of debt? What does it do to your different financial situations if we just traditional snowball and pick the largest debt and start with that? Well, it may benefit one side of the home, if you will, more quickly than it benefits both sides of the home. It could be that you have another consideration with a former spouse, that it would be advantageous for you to get this debt done and out of the way, even though it's not the largest debt. Does that make sense? There may be another reason to start with a different debt as opposed to just the largest. It helps us get out from conflict with a former home if we get this thing paid off. So let's start with that. Then we'll move to the largest and down the line. Sometimes just asking those questions in a fresh way helps you apply the same principle about paying off debt, but we're just going to go about it slightly different than we would have. You asked about life insurance. Again, as my co-author says, life insurance is the great equalizer when it comes to providing for children and the future people that you love and care for. It could be that one of you comes into a marriage and you've got a lot saved and a lot going for you, and you already have some things lined out for your estate, and the other person just simply doesn't. And so it's like, all right, well, your name's not on the house. That's not an asset for you if I die. And so we got to sort through this. If we sit down with a financial planner and look at the big picture, we may decide that it's not the right thing to have your name on this policy, but we're going to set up a separate policy and your name is the only beneficiary of that. Here's the principle we want people to walk away with. You're going to provide for one another and each other's kids. That does not mean everybody's name has to be on every policy. That like somehow that evens the score, everybody. See, when people get into that argument, guys, it's because they're feeling, oh, I think maybe you value your children more than you value me. They're feeling a little fearful about the safety and security that they have in this relationship. And somehow it feels like a competition. If your kids' names are on the beneficiary list and my name is just another name, well, then what you're saying is they're just as important to you as I am, or maybe more important, because they have their cumulative percentages more than like, no. Don't do the math that way. The bigger question is, are you providing for each other and children somehow? Are you making sure somebody is covered in your estate should the worst happen? That's the bigger question. It could be that on any given policy, kids' names are involved and a spouse's name involved. But here's another policy that only has the spouse's name. you can buy a policy and just cover your new spouse in a way that provides for them separate and apart from other monies that's dedicated that's going to help children. It may be that you have 2 houses when you get married. Think through the value of those homes, how you would share for those, how you would provide. Sometimes people have a house they've had 4 generations in their family. They're not going to just sell it and they're not interested in necessarily having your children take possession of that house. They want their children because it's a generational family legacy. Okay, great. That's fine. You can do that and it not be offensive to the marriage because you've provided in other ways for the spouse and their children. Does that make sense? The bottom line here is when people start getting black and white, and when their relational fear, gets in the way of their ability to think creatively about how they manage money and provide for one another, then fear always wins. And I'm here to tell you guys something. This is the therapist in me talking. Fear is a lousy motivator to do relationships. It is a lousy way to make decisions about your financial future, about your financial present, because it pushes you to think in ways you wouldn't do objectively if you didn't have the fear. I worked with a couple one time. They came in and sat down, and money was the issue. He said, I don't know what it is. My wife, she won't put my name as the primary beneficiary on all of her, estate planning stuff, especially life insurance. And she said, well, let me explain. I have 3 children. He doesn't have any children. I'm very concerned about my kids. Right now, my kids sort of get along with my husband, but kind of don't. And honestly, if I were to die today, if I were to be hit by a bus, I don't think he and they would get along well. I think we need to keep provision for each of them separate, not together, because I think it would be a big conflict. She's probably right. A lot of contested estate cases are between step family members. So she's thinking pretty clearly about this and taking into consideration some of the relationships. She said, he doesn't have any children, so it's really easy for him to put me as the primary beneficiary on life insurance that he has. But for me to do that is really complicated. I have other people that I have to think through and consider. Now, for this husband, his relationship fear overwhelmed all of this objectivity about money. And he was like, no, if she doesn't put me first, then I know she's not really committed to me, and I'm not sure I want to stay in this marriage. Do you see what he was doing? Fear of not being, quote, the first in her heart was making him not able to see there's creative ways of providing for you and her kids. And it's not really a competition of whose name is on the beneficiary line. That's just one factor. But that's not really the point. The point is she does love you. She is committed, and she's thinking how to provide for you and her kids in ways that are fair for everybody and show the value that they have. But he got black and white about it. He got like, no, it has to be this way or else. Well, that sort of thing, that fear-driven thinking creates conflict. And one of the things we try to do in this book is help people recognize that below the surface fear in this case, and keep it from becoming from really, getting in the way of their above the surface thinking about how they're going to handle money.
We highly recommend, and I'm happy that we're talking about this conversation, getting professionals involved, such as maybe an attorney and things like that. When we were going through the process of setting up our trust and things like that, our attorney gave us things that we never even thought about. At all. And so sometimes they're able to share experiences, other stories, other client stories, that maybe the scenario is similar to yours, and they will give you other things to think about. How about structure it like this? Have the kids here, put the spouse here, and it's really it'll help avoid conflict in your marriage when you seek professional advice. So I highly encourage people, don't try to do this on your own.
Sometimes you don't know what
you don't know what you don't know, and especially when the conversations are as heavy and deep as money, and maybe you all have a lot of property and different assets and things like that. Like, sit down with somebody professionally, run your plan by them, and let them poke holes in it.
And here's another thought or suggestion. One of the things we found with this book is that it's not just for couples. It's really for financial planners and estate attorneys. When we floated this book out, and by the way, recently this book was listed as #1 on the top 100 estate planning books of all time, which just blew my mind.
Congrats. That's amazing.
The feedback we get from estate people is, I had one attorney, I'll never forget this conversation. He said, I've been doing estate planning for, I think he said 40 years. He is an older gentleman. He said, you opened my eyes to a lot of the reasons why people have these arguments that I'd never thought about before. See, he didn't know the relational stuff. He's an expert on money, but he didn't know the relational below the surface, as we like to say, stuff influencing how people or why people make the crazy decisions they do about money. And so I would say to somebody listening, take a copy of this book to your financial planner. Say, hey, please read chapter 6 on saving for college. I want to come back and talk to you about that. I want you to know all the details and the intricacies about this and about us before we come back. And then we're going to have a great conversation, because all of us are going to be educated a little bit and fine tune our education so that we can work together for the future.
Yeah, so good. Well, that segues me to my next question. You talk about saving for college. Families, I don't care if you're blended or not, you're thinking about your children's education, their college. How do blended families approach that topic, approach that task of paying for college?
Hey, did you guys know that FAFSA, that god awful, have you had to fill one of those out yet? See, goodness, it had to be the government that created that thing. Did you know that you've been to court when you got a divorce and you have legal papers left and right about who has custody and under what conditions and visitation schedules and blah, blah, blah. And did you know FAFSA doesn't care? That whoever is the legal guardian of the child, they don't care. They have a different standard. Did you know that if you're trying to fill out that form and figure out what they're going to look at when it comes to college and funding and maybe getting a loan for your student, is they don't care who has legal guardianship or if you have joint custody or one has primary custody. Whoever has the child in their home slightly more over the course of 365 days than the other home, that's the person. They're going to look at their income and to make decisions about what kind of student loans you can get. So let's say 2 former spouses. One's a physician who makes 6 figures, $300,000-$400,000 a year. The other one is a person who has a job that makes $70,000 a year. It doesn't matter the income levels. It doesn't matter what's on paper in your divorce decree. What matters to the government about student loans is who has the child in their home more than the other person. So if the physician home has the child 183 days compared to the other home, all the student loans going to be based on a 6-figure bigger income. That may not work well for you. If you could, as former spouses, say, you know what's coming? We got to fill out FAFSA next year. So this year, it's like taxes. It's always based on the year prior to the year you're doing. If this year you keep Johnny 3 extra days above what we normally do, then when we come to fill out FAFSA, it'll be based on your income, not my income. And we'll probably get more favorable response from the government about loans and rates. And that's huge. That is and all you had to do is just know the law, know the rules, know that they're a little weird. That little insight could make all the difference for somebody trying to figure out how to pay for college.
Yeah, and see, that goes back to what we just said. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Sometimes it's in a book. Just buy the book. Link will be in the show notes.
It's called the Smart Step Family Guide to Financial Planning. So if you are in a blended family, then this is one heck of an investment for helping you to figure this stuff out. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. And that brings me to another question I have for you, Ron, because most times, we get married and we just go. We are go-getters. And so we just figure things out as we go. And because sometimes we don't know what we don't know, maybe somebody's tuning in and as a result of listening to this conversation, like, we never really had an in-depth strategic conversation about all the nuances that need to be talked about and figured out as a result of us being in a blended family and all the things we need to think about financially. But here's the thing. They're not sure how to approach the conversation. Maybe that terrible motivator that you talked about earlier, fear, pops up like, man, I don't know how to approach him or her and say, we should really sit down and be strategic. So how would you encourage someone listening right now on how to even approach the conversation to sit down and talk about the fact that we probably haven't talked about everything that we need to talk about with our blended family finances?
The beautiful thing about this little conversation is that people can blame us. Imagine this. Honey, I listened to this podcast today, and guess what? I don't know what I don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And I just learned some things. I had my eyes open because I was listening to these people talk on this great podcast. And, I think we need to have a conversation. Would you listen to that podcast? And then maybe we can sit down and maybe read this book or something, and we can just start the dialogue and figure out where it needs to go. Now, in part, that's a strategy I call playing dumb. All right. And by the way, as a married husband of 35 years, I like playing dumb. It actually works pretty well for me. And it comes naturally, actually. And so it's sort of like, honey, I'm not sure what to do about this. I'd love to invite you into helping me figure out how we do this. By the way, everybody listening right now who has a former spouse, for example, those are really touchy conversations when you bring up money issues, aren't they? Yes, because you already have some deep animosity and you're trying not to make it worse so that your kids can travel between homes, in a healthy manner. How do you do that? Play dumb. Call the other household. My goodness, I just learned I don't know much about this. And I've learned you and I need to be thinking about college a little bit because we got to fill out this FAFSA thing. And it's coming 3 years down the road. We're going to be doing that. We can start having conversations now so that we are in a better position to send our beautiful daughter to college when the time comes. Play dumb. Invite the other person to join you in figuring out solutions. Let me just say it. It goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. The opposite of this is playing prideful, smart guy. I know everything. How does that go over when you approach your spouse or a former spouse? Hey, look, I figured this out. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. I'm going to tell you what we ought to be doing and what you're going to do from this point forward. How's that going to go? No, that's just crazy on multiple levels, right? So invite the other person to a dialogue in which you both learn and figure out together how to move forward.
Man, good stuff. So, Ron, do us a favor. Tell everybody what they will find inside the pages of this book once they buy it, and tell them where they can pick up a copy.
Okay, so again, you're going to learn above the surface issues about how to handle money, the practicalities of merging money finances in the beginning. But if you're already married a few years down the road, hey, this will still help you pick up wherever you're at. How many bank accounts do you have? How do you merge? What does that look like? How do you think about money and debt and the other person brings that you bring? How do you think about college and saving? How do you do saving for cars and cash and computers with your children as they go through the teen years and beyond that stuff? We're going to talk about above the surface stuff, related to estate planning. End of life decisions. How do you organize that, orchestrate that in a way that, again, you're providing for one another, your children, and the future? But we're also going to deal and lace it with that conversation of below the surface. What are the trust issues going on? I always think that's ironic. Here we are trying to figure out how to create an estate trust, and I don't trust you as my spouse. There's a problem. Like, we got to deal with the below the surface stuff, or we will never get good above the surface decisions made. So we're going to help you wrestle with that. We're going to talk about a little bit older blended families where you have adult children, and maybe in a previous life, in the single parent years, they were really used to coming home and asking mom for money, and mom just said, here, what do you need? And now they're asking for down payments on cars and a house. And the new spouse is saying, whoa, time out. Hello, you do what? I don't think we're making those kinds of loans and investments. Now you have a conflict over how you parent adult children. We got a whole chapter on that kind of stuff. So it is an integrated discussion about the relational matters and the financial matters. as you put together a blended family. And the whole process is to try to help you come up with what we call that togetherness agreement, so that you have a plan together of how you're going to be a family and love and serve one another with the money and assets that you have available to you. The book is available wherever books are sold, which means Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Walk into a store, they can find it for you, but you can also find it online at any of those places. And if people just want to know more about the work that I do, a couple of websites, smartstepfamilies.com will put you in touch with everything that we have to offer, smartstepfamilies.com. And you can also go to familylife.com and learn more about the work we're doing there.
Great insight, Ron. As we leave, I want you to talk to one more person. The person who feels the need to have this conversation, but has automatically played out in their mind that their other partner or former partner will automatically shut this conversation down. And they're like, this isn't going to work, so I'm not going to do it. What would you say to that person?
Okay, great question. Yeah, so the fact that you believe they're going to shut you down tells me you think you've tried this before and it hit a brick wall and it didn't go anywhere. So 3 words: chase their fear. So it used to be you'd say, hey, I'm wondering if there's a way we could talk about changing the beneficiaries on or whatever, talk about our estate planning. And that was always met with, no, we don't have to worry about that. You'll take care of my kids and I'll take care of yours. And you just know there's more to it than that. Goodwill only goes so far from a legal standpoint. So you really know you got to have a bigger conversation, but it always dead ends. So now what you're going to do is chase their fear. You know, in the past, I've brought up estate planning, and I've noticed that it's just something you're not worried about and you're just sort of okay. But I'm also wondering if you're kind of afraid of the conversation. Like, is there something about it that worries you? Is there something about it that kind of gets under your skin? What's uncomfortable to you about having this conversation? Now, notice I'm not being accusatory. I'm not saying you're just running from this thing. You don't care. You know, I'm not being critical. I'm really trying to understand what's below the surface. And if your partner can begin to say, well, I don't know, I just know, you know, I have a whole lot more than you do, and it just feels awkward to me, and I don't want you to feel bad about your kids, or I don't want you to feel like I won't provide for them. Or maybe they'll say, you know, I don't know, my grandmother had this same situation as we're in, and she ended up broke. And last thing I want is for one of us to end up getting on the opposite sides of the other one. And like that is really important. Whatever that fear is, and pain is another word, whatever the pain is that's keeping them from having this conversation has to be dealt with first, or they'll never have the conversation. And as a partner who loves your spouse, you have the opportunity to serve them by trying to help them at least put words on their fear, process it out loud with you in such a way that they perhaps have their fears set aside. Sometimes just saying it out loud brings you to a place where you go, oh man, I didn't realize that was even a concern for you. Tell you what, let's make sure we're going to pay special attention to this little piece right here that is bothering you. And I don't want to let that keep us from having the bigger conversation that we need to have. So would it be okay if we really paid attention to that? Could we try to have this bigger conversation? Like, pay attention to the fear, chase it, try to figure it out, help them figure out what's going on inside them. And then together, once that's out of the way, or at least acknowledged, then maybe you can have the money conversation. That's delicate. Every once in a while, somebody needs a third party to sort of help the couple get past whatever that roadblock is. Sometimes a counselor can do that, financial planner sometimes. Again, my experience is, a lot of financial planners just think above the surface and they don't really know how to wrestle with the below the surface stuff. So sometimes you need somebody that's a little more relationally in tune with these conflicts. A therapist or a counselor is probably a little better choice at that point. But it could be that you just got a marvelous uncle who's just wise and he's got some years on him, and he knows how to just sit down with people and go, yeah, I hear what you're talking about. Let's talk about that thing you're worried about. let's get that out of the way, and then we can get around to dealing with the other stuff. So bring in a third party if you need them.
That was great.
I love that, man.
Yes.
We can't say thank you enough, Ron, for coming and breaking this down, because this is a tough conversation. It's a nuanced conversation, and we need to make sure that we address every nook and cranny. So thank you for opening up and expanding our mindsets around this area. Thank you for making some time out of your busy schedule to break it all down on the His and Her Money Show.
Thank you.
Hey, glad to do it, guys, and great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Everything you need to know to approach your finances soundly and have a good plan moving forward if you are in a blended family. There are nuances that you need to consider. And as we said multiple times, sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
That's so true. So make sure that you grab a copy of this book. Again, all the links will be in the show notes of this episode.
All right, guys, that's all we got for this time. Remember, it's up to you. We want you to take dominion over your money and your life. Now the ball is in your hand. Let's get to work. Until next time, guys. Peace.
Bye, y'all.